verses to it, not a lot of information, but there is so much depth into what we're going to be studying about today. And this lesson today is the key component of what we do as Christians today. And this is the key component that keeps churches from growing today. And this is the key component that gets more people depressed if we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. And that is the ability to be encouraging and be very supportive.
今天要讨论的主题呢，就是鼓舞、鼓励、跟协助、跟支持。对，这是我们主要就是一个基督徒最主要能够就是发展，然后能够成为基督徒最主要的原因。
For example, if I'm walking down the street and I see William, okay, I have a choice. I can either go, ooh, that's William. I can have that choice, can't I? Yes. Or I can go, hey William, what's up?
Hey, Jay.
See? And it makes him happy, right? We have that choice.
当我们碰到人，比如假设说我们碰到威廉的时候，我们有选择，我们要不就是看到他，然后就闪，然后要不然呢就是。 看到他跟他嗨 William 打招呼，让他觉得让他心情很快乐，这个是。
And there's another one that's encouraging, supportive. Let's say William's at school. I see him at school. William goes, I'm having trouble with my teacher. And I go, so that's your problem. Is that the right kind of attitude I should have? Or should I go, William, well, what seems to be the problem? And I listen. Those are the two things we as Christians today don't do a lot of unless we really think about it. Because human nature tells us that we're supposed to go, oh, if that's your problem, let me go and do something. Or, oh, William, your hair's messed up, I don't want to deal with you today, or anything like that. We have those choices. And we have to make a conscious effort to be supportive, a conscious effort to encourage one another. So, let's go ahead and let's go through all of this. So, where we left Saul last week was in the city of Damascus, right? And he had just seen Ananias. Ananias said, okay, I'm going to support you, I'm going to encourage you. And then Saul goes off into the desert for a period of time, comes back, and he starts teaching in the synagogues. Were the people happy about that?
Yeah.
No, they weren't. They were really not happy. And so how did Saul leave the city of Damascus? Does anybody remember? Say what? By nightfall in a basket. Now, if I were you and I was traveling and I thought I was very important, leaving a city in a basket is not my choice. In fact, give me a limo. You know, give me lots of things and let me just wave. You know, the fireworks, I'm leaving. Y'all can celebrate now. But that's not what happened to Paul or Saul. He was there and was having to escape. So that's why I said from being a leader to being alone. Because what he wanted to do, he had spent 3 years in the desert, or a period of time in the desert, studying God's Word and studying what God wanted him to do. And guess where he wanted to go? Back to where he came from.
OK， 我们上礼拜呢讲到的是亚拿尼亚被上帝派去就是协助扫罗，就是保罗。然后呢，保罗呢后来呢又在沙漠中待了3年。 然后去灵修嘛，然后后来他又回到大马士革，然后大马士革他就开始在会堂里面去传教，但是呢，他们当然犹太人就会不欢迎他，所以呢，他虽然很重要，他觉得他很重要，因为上帝拣选他当做他的器皿，但是呢，这时候他就必须偷偷摸摸的，就从城墙里面就是坐在篮子里面被人家垂掉下来，就是偷偷摸摸的半夜就逃走了，所以其实这个并不是一个很好的事情。如果他真的那么重要，可是他离开是那种很不光彩的离开。那所以这边下面就谈到，就是说，你要当一个 leader， 就是必须要习惯公平。
All right. So what we do, we have Saul decides to travel back to Jerusalem.
然后扫罗这边呢决定了，他就要回去耶路撒冷。他从耶路撒冷来到大马士革，这时候他就又从大马士革回到耶路撒冷。
Now remember what Saul had studied all of his life? He studied the law, and he was what kind of a person? Starts with a P. He was a Pharisee. And Pharisees were very strict about the law. They wanted to obey exactly what the Bible had told them to do, or the Old Testament. And so he wants, because he's been saved now, his conversion takes on a new meaning. It means that he is free from the tradition and the law.
扫罗呢，其实他是一个法利赛人。那法利赛人呢，是在犹太教里面呢，是最遵从旧约的律法的人。然后呢，可是因为他信了主，所以他在这边呢，决定的就是他必须要从传统跟这个律法中脱离，得到自由。
And this is where he goes. So let's look at this on the map, okay? This is the map of Jerusalem today. All right? Remember, he was up in Damascus, and he was going to travel about 242 kilometers down to Jerusalem. All right? One of the places, so he comes, this is, you know, what biblical scholars would say, we think he might have done. How many of you, when you go places, you go to certain things, like in Washington, D.C., you want to go see this, this, and this, because now you understand what it means. Can you imagine Saul coming back to Jerusalem after his conversion? There would be places he would want to see. And so these are some of the places he might have seen. He might have gone to the Garden of Gethsemane. Now, what happened in the Garden of Gethsemane?
Jesus prayed.
That's where Jesus prayed.
就是他回到，他回到耶路撒冷之后呢，觉得他会去哪里，一定是对他有意义的地方，所以他第一个回去的就是那个地方，就是耶稣祈祷。
It is amazing when something happens in your life, things take on a new meaning. And I guarantee you, the Garden of Gethsemane had a different meaning for Saul now. Then he might have traveled to the Mount of Olives. Does anybody know what happened on the Mount of Olives?
Crucified?
No, that's where Jesus went back up into heaven. I would want to go see that if I had just seen Jesus on the road to Damascus and I'm coming back to Jerusalem. I want to see these places.
Is the grave where the grave is?
Right? The grave is in this area right down here.
So it's also the
In that area. I forgot to do Golgotha. I should have put that on there, and I'll try to do that in a later lesson for you. And then there's a lot in the Bible that has to say about the Kidron Valley and everything, and he would have had to travel through that very famous valley to get to Jerusalem. This is the old city of Jerusalem, and where the temple is. And in Saul or Paul's day, guess what? This building was still in existence. So he could have seen from the Mount of Olives and the Garden of Gethsemane this beautiful temple that had been built. And he would travel right here through the gates to see the temple. And I think that is just so interesting.
Is that the temple that Jesus taught when he was 12?
Yes, this would be, well, the synagogue, I really don't know where the synagogue is.
Oh, okay.
But this is where the
was
temple
wondering
that Jesus would have seen. This is Herod's temple.
Oh, okay.
And this area right here. But this is where all the sacrifices were done. But this is what Saul would have seen.
Okay.
And I guarantee you, after studying the law for 18 years, the conversion, he wants to go back because it means something totally different to him. Okay?
他是就是这个意思，他想要回去，因为这些东西就是对他开始那个时候就对他。
So let's look at Acts 9 and 26, and that's found on page 225 in your Bibles. 9:26.
第9章第26节。扫罗到了耶路撒冷，想与门徒结交，他们却都怕他，不信他是门徒。
Look at these words. Okay? It says, when he came to Jerusalem, when Saul came back to Jerusalem, who did he try to join? Who did Saul try to join with when he went back to Jerusalem?
Jesus'
The
disciples.
disciples. Who were the disciples? We've studied one of them.
The ones that he was trying to have killed and didn't have killed.
See how that would be? Saul wanted to join back with a group of people that he just tried to kill about 3 years earlier.
他想要回去参与的那群门徒呢，是他3年前想要把他们统统杀光的那一群。
Now, how would that make you feel?
如果你是那一群门徒之一，你觉得怎么样？
There's a lot of not trusting going on. Here's this man that really was against Jesus, and now he says, I want to be a part of you.
就是这一个人是他就是这么的反击，然后今天突然跑来说，我要跟你们在一起，我想成为你们的一份子。
And what I want to do is I want to talk about a word in the Bible that has a significant bearing on everything we do today. And in English, we use that word a lot.
在英文里面呢，他这边要强调一个很重要的字，很重要的字眼就是他在英文里面很常使用到。
The word is but. We use that a lot in our language.
但是。
And this is what but means. It's used to introduce a statement that adds something to a previous statement and usually contrasts with it in some way. For example, Megan wanted to go to the store, but she had no money. So did Megan go to the store? No. Yenda wanted to drive his car, but he had no gas in it. Could he drive his car? You had to push it. That's true. You can push it. You can definitely push it. But the normal way is you would have gas in the car. But is one of those words that is used to say, I really want to do this, but I can't.
在这里呢，常常用到的就是他去补充说明你之前的一个叙述，但是呢，相反的字眼，就用相反的字眼来补充说明你前面的叙述，但是后面都是相反，跟你前面讲的字眼相反。
And Mike, here you go. Here's your English little lesson for you. You ready? The word but is called a conjunction. That's all it is. A conjunction that adds two phrases. You know what a conjunction is. Y'all studied that in school. But that's all it is. It says you want to do this, but, oh, I better not. And we use that so much in our language. And this is significant when we start looking at Acts the 9th chapter. Because using that word but means that Saul of Tarsus had a reputation for knowing all the answers. What had he studied all of his life? The law. So he would know exactly the law. All of a sudden there was a conversion. Now he's free from the law and he wants to join the people he was directly opposed to. Did they want him in there? No. So that's why the but is there in verse 26. He wanted to join, but they did not believe him. And so what did he do? But he changed his attitude when he accepted Jesus. There you go. Here's a sentence with but in it. He truly believed, and then the conversion experience took place, but they didn't want it. It's a human nature, because Saul experiences a basic trait of all humans. He experiences a basic trait of all humans. And for some reason, there we go. I love this. All the words came up today. Here we go. So this is what Saul was experiencing. This lovely little statement here. Did I skip some stuff?
Yes.
No, you did. Okay. You have these.
I duplicated?
On the sheet.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay. Sorry about that. Here is something that we should all think about. We have a new belief. Then you add the history to it, and sometimes it's a lack of forgiveness. And I'm sorry I messed up on the sheets today. I'll try to get that correct for you. New belief plus the history sometimes equals a lack of forgiveness. That is one of the first things that humans don't do a lot. We don't like to forgive.
这边讲到的是扫罗呢，他之前他学到的是所有的那种知识，但是呢，律法的知识，但是呢，他改变了他的态度，当他接受了耶稣基督的时候。但是呢，这里讲到了但是，因为特别是26节，因为这个是他就必须要面对的是所有，这是人性的一个考验，因为他们就不是信任他，这是一定的。那所以呢，这边就讲到了说，这边 new belief，OK， 新的信念，然后加上一个历史，加上他之前的过往，然后呢就缺乏的就是宽恕，其他人缺乏了其他人就是从其他人这里宽恕，对，因为那些门徒就是到这里其实还不相信他。
All right. Now, has anybody heard of the word reputation? Is reputation a good thing or a bad thing?
Depends.
It really depends upon what.
If it's good or if it's bad.
If it's a good reputation or a bad one, right? Just like anything else is. Do you tend to believe people that have a bad reputation?
Reputation 名声前面有这个 reputation 名声。
And that's what occurred with Saul. He had that reputation of being the person who opposed them, and then he wants to do all of this stuff. So Saul seeks, I love this word, camaraderie. He wanted to be part of that group so bad that he wanted to come back to Jerusalem and be a part of that group. If you look at verse 26, though, it says, once again, when he came to Jerusalem, he tried to join the disciples, and there's that but they were all afraid of him, not believing that he was really a disciple.
Camaraderie 是同志之间的友爱跟忠诚，这里的同志就是志同道合的。
And this is something that we all have to deal with, is our reputations and what we do in life, and whether or not people want to forgive us. And in this case, Saul had done some really bad things to these disciples. You remember, basically 3 years ago, he was trying to put them to death. And now he wants to be part of them. Kind of an uneasy situation to be in. But this is what he learned when he was in the desert. He learned a basic truth that we live by today is he wanted to further God's kingdom with the church in Jerusalem. He wanted to see other people saved. He wanted to see other people join in this big movement to go to heaven and be saved and accept Jesus. He had a burning desire. It's like when anybody first becomes saved, they can't wait to tell everybody. They're just like, woohoo, here I am. Let me put the neon sign up. Let me show you a brochure. Let me tell you the Bible. Let me read this. Let me do this. Let me do this. And then as you get older, you go, oh yeah, I've been there, done that. I bought the t-shirt. That's not what Christian's all about. It's all about still having that desire, that passion to do it. And Saul said, hey, I want to be part of furthering God's kingdom for you. I want to do these things. And they're going, now wait a minute. We have a problem here. We have a problem because you did something bad to us. And we don't know. So none of the believers believed him. Have you ever told a story that was true and no one believed it? How did it make you feel? Discouraged, angry, mad, wanting to slap people around? I mean, just think what Paul was going through, or Saul was going through. Here he'd seen the Lord on the road to Damascus. He had been blind. He went to the desert. He saw all these things with God for about 3 years. Came back to Jerusalem and everybody went, not touching you. You're damaged goods.
扫罗在这边呢，因为他想要寻求这些门徒的那种忠诚跟友谊，可是呢，因为他又想要他在3年，他在沙漠里面3年，然后他知道他的目标是什么，那所以他回到耶路撒冷，他想要在耶路撒冷，就是推动，这就是在教会里面，然后推动这些关于上帝的一些信念然后他想要建立上帝的王国，但是呢，没有一个 leader， 没有一个领导相信他的故事，就是因为他过去的所做事的人。
However, isn't it wonderful that when we all believe who Jesus is, there's always going to be a person that says, hey, I know you're telling the truth. And in this case, one man stood up to the leaders and he took action.
但是呢，在这里有一个人站出来说，他相信。
And that is something that we all do today. We have people that we truly love. And we will truly do anything for them. And in the case of this individual, he knew God loved him, and he knew who God was, and he wanted to do what God was telling him to do, and he did it. So let's look at verse 27 now of Acts, the 9th chapter. Go ahead and read 9:27.
27节，唯有巴拿巴接待他，领去见使徒，把他在路上怎么看见主，主怎么向他说话，他在大马士革怎么奉主耶稣的名放胆传道，都叙说出来。
What does verse 27 start with?
But
It starts with the word but. What does but mean?
opposite statement.
An opposite statement. Something's going to happen. In other words, the apostles or the disciples did not believe who Paul or Saul said he was, but someone else is going to come up to his defense. And what was the man's name? Barnabas. Guess what Barnabas' name means?
巴拿巴的意思是什么？
And this is something you might want to name children after. I don't know, because it's really one of these good words. Barnabas, translated, means the encourager.
鼓舞者。
Or the son of
在
encourager.
这边巴拿巴 BARNABAS 在这里是鼓舞的人。
So Barnabas is going to live up to his name because he is the one who is going to do all the encouraging. So what does he do? Number one, he refused the Jerusalem leaders' opinion. He said, I don't think what you're doing is the right thing. And I want to point out this very important fact. Barnabas heard this information. He did not believe it was true. Did Barnabas go on the internet and start posting that they didn't believe those people? Or did he tweet about them? Or did he run and talk bad about those people over there not believing him? What did Barnabas do? He went straight to the people that were saying Saul wasn't who he was and said, look, you've got to hear this man out. And how many times do we do that in our lives When we hear something, and instead of going to that source and saying, hey, you have offended me, you got to start telling other people about it. So in this case, Barnabas went straight to the disciples and say, hey, I think you are wrong. And, go ahead.
OK， 在这边呢，我们可以看到，我想刚刚讲的是，你看到26节，我们有个 but， 但是，因为但是后面就是接着是门徒不相信他，然后呢27节第一个字就是但是，又是来一个 but， 它反的是什么？反的就是前面门徒不相信他，然后就是所以说负负得正，这个时候就有一个人突然相信他了，就是巴拿巴。那巴拿巴的意思去鼓舞者的意思，所以他听到了这些意见，对扫罗的意见，但是他并没有听，他并没有放着不管，他反而是直接去告诉他们说：你们错了，你们这样子是不对的，我知道的是什么样子的状况，然后去帮扫罗解释。所以在这里就有一个人站出来去支持扫罗。
And what else did he do? He was offended by what they had said about Saul. And so he went straight to them. He talked with the leaders and he defended who Saul was. If you look back in verse 27, it says, he told them how Saul on his journey had seen the Lord and that the Lord had spoken to him and how in Damascus he had preached fearlessly in the name of who? Jesus. That's about as much as defending or encouraging you can say. Also, he changed the leaders' minds because they accepted Saul into their fold. And can you imagine who were the people that actually heard Barnabas' message? Think about all of those people that we've studied. We know who was the leader of the church in Jerusalem. James, Peter, John, all those leaders who knew who Jesus was. All of a sudden this element comes from Damascus and says, no, not happening. And one within their own fold or their own congregation or their own group says, no, wait a minute, he's telling the truth. You need to follow him. You need to listen to what he says because he's on a different mission from God than you are. And I was studying this yesterday, and I was talking with Alan about it yesterday, and Alan brought up a very fascinating point. All of these Jewish leaders came from Israel. Where did Saul of Tarsus come from? And where's Tarsus located? Starts with a T.
Saul.
Turkey. Saul was from Turkey. Was Saul, did he have anything to do with Jerusalem? No, he was living up in Turkey. And all of a sudden this man comes down from Damascus and goes, I believe who God is too. Wouldn't you be questionable? But think of all the things that Saul's going to be able to bring to the ministry of God. Not only, think about this, okay? This is what Saul had that Jesus wanted and God wanted him to use. Not only could he speak Greek, because he was from Turkey, he would also have to learn what? Because the Torah was in that language. Torah, T-O-R-A-H. He could speak Hebrew. He could speak, because he was a Roman citizen, he could speak Latin. He was at least, Mike, he was at least trilingual. Look how much he could bring to the table. He had something the other disciples did not have.
在这边 James 讲到的是，为什么上帝会拣选扫罗？为什么？因为为什么？因为其实第一，他不是在耶路撒冷，他其实住在，他是从土耳其来的，那个地方他罗斯是土耳其，所以他不只会说犹太，就是希伯来文。他也会说希腊，然后他也会说土耳其当边的语言， 后因为他也是 Roman， 他是罗马